Hello everybody, welcome back to Animated Talk. Today we're going to talk about Byzantine art in the making. This is a book that I found at a local bookshop, and it's kind of caught me by surprise. It's not a subject that you find terribly often when it comes to art books. Byzantine art, I think, is largely kind of ignored by the public, and it really shouldn't be. A lot of modern art definitely has influence from this particular era, and there's also just a lot of really powerful art that continues to have an influence, especially in Europe and in Eastern countries. A lot of influence is coming out of Byzantine art, and so we really should have a better understanding of it. Now, this particular book here is talking about the 3rd to 7th century, which is basically kind of the transition from what is ancient art for people now into what became Byzantine art, and talking about how it is really a very distinct type of art form and not what we generally just kind of go, that's medieval art. No, this is a very specific type of art, and it had a very specific type of purpose. And so this book is talking about how the transition from ancient art to this happened, and it actually happened in a very short period of time, where dramatic changes throughout the world, especially Europe, started to kind of influence the changing in art. But also it just talks about how this particular art form really kind of grew, and how different types of Byzantine art kind of started to influence each other. So it's a really, really good book. Now, like a lot of older books like this, and this definitely is an older book, it gives us, unfortunately, the information in the front, and then we are supposed to go and look at the examples elsewhere by following the figures. It's not my favorite type of book because a lot of times you have to go back and forth and to find what it is that they're talking about, and sometimes you can kind of lose the thought by going and trying to find the image later on. It's much more helpful, in my opinion, for everything to be together. So it's not my favorite type of book style, but when you have really, really dense information, though, I can understand why they do that, so that there's just more of a narrative flow. They go ahead and have you go find the figure elsewhere. I don't really like it, but I get it. Let me just kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. The first, I don't know, about third of the book is pretty much academic writing. If you are somebody that is looking for plain-spoken discussion about art, this is not where you're going to find it in this particular book. But if you really, really want to understand this particular era and how it has influenced art over the course of time, this is definitely a great book for it. Occasionally in that first section they do have a few images, but for the most part it's basically just text. But once you get into the next portion of the book, you get into the images, and there is a lot of black and white images, but they're pretty crisp and clear. Now, I have read that there are some prints of it that are in better condition than this book, which is kind of yellowing a bit, and you could see the pictures more clearly. But in general, I think that you get a pretty good idea of what's going on here. I have looked in online. This book is actually kind of creeping into the $30 to $40 range in a lot of cases, and so it's kind of pushing to the point where I'm not sure if it's worth the money. But at the same time, it's hard to find Byzantine art from this era all in one place. Typically online, you have just a couple of examples that are being shown again and again and again. So if you're really trying to learn about this particular era and get a good feel of the art for it, this book might be worth spending that extra money for. And unfortunately also, because they try to make sure that the pictures don't go over pages, sometimes you have to keep turning the book, which is a little awkward. But I do prefer not having images cross over the middle of the binding. I find that annoying. So even though turning the book is kind of annoying in and of itself, I prefer that than having images go over the center of the page. It's just, I find that to be very distracting. But it gets into all kinds of different things, not just one form. You have sculpture, of course, you have painting, you have architecture. So this is a very in-depth book, and it's something that I highly recommend if you are trying to get a little bit deeper into art. If you're somebody that's just looking for greatest hits, this is definitely not where you want to go. So again, if you want to just do a quick screen grab, there you go. Here's the book. Oh, and here's the back if you want to see that. And it's definitely a book that I would recommend, but again, I would try to see if you can find it maybe used and maybe a little bit beat up, because it's getting a little expensive, at least for my taste. Hopefully this discussion starts an animated discussion in your home about art, and hopefully you'll continue to come back for more discussion about art and, of course, my beloved animation, which I talk about on this channel a lot too. Bye-bye, everybody.